you get high, we can see your greedy side. You get high, we can see your greedy side. I believe that we will win. I believe that we will win.
This is Steve Zeltzer with WorkWeek, and today we're going to be talking about a very important and historic strike that's taking place at the University of California of 19,000 teaching assistants, graduate students, 7,000 postdoctoral researchers, and 5,000 academic researchers who are members of UAW. And this is the largest education strike in the history of California, maybe the nationally of education workers, and it's a struggle about living wages. It's a struggle about housing. It's a struggle about all issues really facing the working class in California and nationally. And joining us is Evan Wartel. He's with at UC Davis. He's a psychology graduate student. And Tate LeBlanc, he's a PhD student in developmental psychology at UC in Riverside. Welcome to WorkWeek.
Thanks for having us.
So maybe both of you can introduce yourself and talk about why you're on strike and what the issues are for you.
So Tate LeBlanc, second year PhD student, developmental area. Broadly, I see this as, an issue of equity and an issue of justice. Because here's the thing. We have a UC system that's working great for a thinner and thinner slice of those at the top and leaving everyone else, academic workers especially, in the dirt. And here's the thing, if union members, academic workers continue to accept concessionary contracts with wages that don't keep up with the cost of living, that don't keep food on the table, that don't keep workers housed, rich people will still get PhDs. And because of the way redlining has affected this country, because we have not recovered from the predatory lending practices that preceded 2008, and because we still live in a country where women still make 80 cents to men's dollar, it means that rich white men will still continue to occupy those positions. We're going to see a lack of representation in the education pool. We're going to see a lack of diversity in the workforce. And so broadly for me, this is, I'm out here as an issue of equity and justice, and that's how I see it.
Ever been on strike before?
First time, and proud to be here.
And Evan, you as well. Why don't you talk about how you see this struggle that you're in?
Yeah, totally. Yeah, my name is Evan Wartel. I'm a first year psychology PhD student studying personality and how people change and grow over time at UC Davis. And in addition to the diversity issue that Tate is highlighting, for me, the reason I'm striking is that it's before this, I used to work in tech. I was a data scientist for many years, and having seen the kind of salaries that people are making there, and also the market value of the kind of skills that it takes to test hypotheses, analyze data, do research, I see this as an issue of the health of research and science writ large. More increasingly, survey after survey is finding that graduate students are not thriving, that half of them are not interested in continuing on an academic career. And, this suggests that it's the for a society that values progress and warm clothes and energy and anything that took research to make, we all benefit from it, and we all suffer when the academic scientific workforce pipeline is having trouble recruiting and retaining workers.
And the University of California is a rich institution. They have a lot of assets, a lot of resources, and apparently they're spending a lot of money, millions of dollars on lawyers fighting the union. Your struggle for a living wage, your struggle for housing, your struggle for equity. Why is there such intransigence by the administration? I mean, I just saw a letter saying that you're violating the labor law, but apparently there have been continuous labor law violations by the university.
University of California is a huge bureaucratic system, and it's not uncommon in such huge bureaucracies to have multiple competing interests. And frankly, the fact that graduate students and other academic workers weren't unionized until recently has meant, I think, that our interests, we just got squeezed out.
Yeah, I was going to say, Steve, in answer of the first part of your question, why haven't they paid academic workers a living wage? Probably because President Drake wants to hang on to a $6.5 million mansion, and everyone else wants to hang on to their, multi-million-dollar and $500,000 salaries. Look, they've transformed the UC system, which is supposed to be a public investment, a public good, into their own personal gambling wheel and their own personal racketeering scheme, where they've siphoned as much wealth as they possibly could in tuition, fees, and research grants, siphoned it to the very top, which is wealth generated by academic workers like us. And it's been a decade process and a decade racketeering scheme in the making.
And these regents, I know we covered the Feinstein and her husband, Richard Blum, was in charge of pensions at UC and was shuffling off some of the pension money of the UC workers to his hedge fund. It seems like these regents really aren't representing working people of California, and certainly not very interested in the conditions of the graduate students and the workers there. What is the response of the regents to your struggle, since they're the ones in charge of management at UC?
I haven't heard anything from them. And, considering they have a say in what goes on here, it's also like they're also completely inaccessible to us or to other people who want to send them a message.
I also have not heard anything from the regents or out of their office directly. I can say if the provosts on each individual campus are any close proxy to how the regents are thinking. I have heard that the UC provost at, I think it was UC Davis, referred to us striking academic workers as 2-year-old children throwing a tantrum in a grocery store. So that was quite interesting to hear.
And Gavin Newsom, the governor, and the lieutenant governor are both on the Board of Regents. Have you heard anything from them?
Not a peep.
No.
Why don't you talk about how the strike has affected you, what's happening on your campuses, and what kind of support it has?
So we've seen a pleasantly surprising turnout here at UC Riverside. So for those who are listening or eventually listening, UC Riverside is situated in a historically conservative part of California, low population density. But what we've seen is massive community support, what we surmise to be one of the largest demonstrations on the UC Riverside campus in recent memory. And we've kept that energy going up throughout the week, all the way starting on the first day of the strike on Monday, up until the last marches were held this afternoon. So we've been pleasantly surprised by the turnout, the support, the cross-sector, the cross-community coalitions forming here at UC Riverside.
And here at Davis, we have a large number of graduate students and other academic workers who are striking together. And it's not only is the energy maintained, but I would say the mood is that it's just getting started, that people are excited to see where this goes. The union is receptive to feedback from rank and file members about how the pickets could be improved, and we are excited to see the pressure this is generating in terms of press articles, portraying what the UC system is doing and what our struggle is. And, in terms of what's happening at the bargaining table, it certainly feels like we have some momentum here. And
the support of other unions, there's AFSCME, there's UPTE. Have the other unions helped support your struggle?
Yeah, even all the way to local unions here in our own community. We have a great, powerful union at this local coffee shop in Redlands called Slow Bloom. They've been funneling in coffee donations all throughout the week, so keeping us caffeinated, keeping us going. We've also got local support from some of the Teamster Union members here in the Riverside area. So a lot of cross union support here in Riverside.
Yeah, we've seen people picketing in solidarity from other unions with us, and same thing too with Teamsters unions, truck drivers not delivering things to UC campuses.
And this strike is also connected with the UAW with other graduate students. There are 80,000 graduate students in the United States who are members of the UAW who have organized. And I understand there's been some discussion with the Columbia UAW workers about the experience that they had, and they had a victory in the struggle. Maybe you can talk about that.
I'll be honest, I'm not too familiar with the details of the process of the Columbia strike, but I was aware of the outcome. They were able to lock in a $60,000 salary, which is close to, if not a livable wage, which is promise for our efforts here in California. It shows that when we do come together, we organize, actively and collectively fight back, we have a fighting chance to actually win this thing and actually secure a living wage for our workers.
And living even on $60,000 is hard in California. Prices of housing and everything else. This living wage demand also is affecting other workers in California. I mean, they're adjuncts I was talking earlier about the situation of adjuncts in community colleges and the CSU system. They face similar types of problems trying to survive in this thing. Do you think your struggle is relevant, first of all, to other adjuncts, education workers, and do you think it should spread?
100%. The underfunding of those who are interested in research in the sciences and in education has been going on for quite a long time. And not only would I say that our struggle is relevant to other people in similar positions in other educational systems, but as we demand a living wage and as we hopefully see some movement from the UC towards our union's positions on those articles, the entire process of doing science should get healthier, which I think only benefits all of us. I can't say it enough.
The university also is, as you were saying earlier, has another priority apparently than living wages for the workers. But part of what we've covered in WorkWeek is the corporatization of the university, both the regents and also drug companies that really have more and more control over what's happening at the university. Does that concern you, and should it be an issue for the people of California?
Given the funding crunch that has affected higher education broadly over the last even 20 years, the individual researchers are forced to turn to private-public partnerships to fund the kind of research that they want. And there's a certain argument for how some of that can be beneficial, but there's also, I think, a big argument that should be made for undirected basic research. You don't know where it goes, and when it goes somewhere positive, the benefits pay for themselves over time and time again. So the fact that people have to or feel the need to turn towards industry for sponsorships to make the buildings a little nicer or hire people to do the work. I think it's too bad.
Snowball off of that really quickly. Think about what I mentioned earlier. The UC system and higher education more broadly is supposed to be a public good, something that people invest in with their taxpayer dollars in exchange for a quality service, which is education. The problem is when you turn to industry, and let's call a spade, corporate billionaires more broadly, and you start to depend on them for your funding source, you become beholden to those individuals where not only money is concentrated, but power is concentrated. That becomes influential in what research gets funded, what departments get funded, and where resources are allocated in the university. So we should absolutely have alarm bells blaring and going off when the ship starts to turn in that direction towards a dependency on corporations and billionaires. Absolutely.
And we're seeing now the destruction of Twitter by Elon Musk and the firing of engineers, not just by Twitter, but by Facebook. It seems there's a massive downsizing in tech and that workers are going to pay the cost of that. What does that mean for the workers at UC, the researchers and other workers at UC? It seems like there's a tremendous concentration of wealth now that is coming, crashing down with the economy.
What's happening in the tech world, it's interesting because there's a famous venture capitalist who has had this quote about how software is eating the world. And it sort of speaks to, from his point of view, how everywhere you look, software is the next thing, is the new thing. And one of the reasons that the tech world and the software world have become so successful is because they're taking basically the scientific method and applying it to running a business, where testing a business thesis becomes testing a hypothesis in an uncertain domain, where maximizing user retention or user clicks on a variance of an ad becomes a scientific experiment. And tech has seen that is working and has taken it for themselves. Again, going back to Tate's point about how these things are developed in the public and exploited in private.
And this massive wealth, we're talking about a living wage, $60,000 a year. And yet in California, you have over 180 billionaires. You have a massive amount of wealth. And there doesn't seem to be any real effort to say that this wealth has to be redistributed to working people, to graduate students, to the people in California. You think that your strike and your struggle will begin to raise this issue of the disparity of wealth in California and the United States?
I certainly hope so, if it hasn't already. I'll put it this way. Our strike, our movement, has captured the attention of Senator Bernie Sanders, who is regarded as the standard bearer for wanting to reduce class inequality here in the United States. So if that doesn't signal what our movement is about and the undergirding principles behind it, I don't know what does.
And the strike has now gone on since the 14th of December. How long are you prepared to stay out? And the university has said that the management, that it's illegal, you're conducting illegal activities. They're trying to get you to go back to work. What's going on? And are you prepared to fight on?
I know I am.
Yeah, we're prepared to stay out as long as it takes, right? Because again, I want to emphasize, it's not just our own personal struggle here or something about employees who are far removed from other people's everyday lives. We are talking about trying to rectify, frankly, unjustifiable working conditions that have been affecting anyone who's gone into academia for a long time. And we're trying to say, hey, that's not right. It is unsustainable. It's always been unsustainable. And now for the first time, this is the part where the unsustainability hits becomes seen for what it is. And we aim to change this for future generations. And
you both say this is your first strike that you've been on. How have you been changed as a result of this strike in your outlook and your feeling about unions and labor struggles?
I will say one thing that's come up for me is the different, we'll say, like schools of thought surrounding the strike. There's all these different camps that people fall into. There's the pro-strikers who don't even give it a second thought and join the picket line as soon as it opens. There's the folks that are on the fence, and then there are the folks who are hesitant, the folks that are fearful, and there's the folks that are adamantly opposed to it. And so it's given me a deep appreciation for coalition building and trying to get people all on the same page and see that being a part of this movement, of course it's uncomfortable, of course it's not easy, but it is for the greater good. It's a matter of equity, it's a matter of justice, and using Evan's language from earlier, it's rectifying an unsustainable system.
And you're both young workers who are first time in strike and as unions. It seems like there is in the United States a growing strike wave. The railroad workers may go on strike. They've had intolerable conditions, not being able to take off sick days because of downsizing by management. It seems like we're entering into a new situation in the American working class where maybe potentially millions of workers may be joining together and fighting together to transform their situation. Do you see this as just an isolated thing or part of a growing movement in the entire working class?
I think it could well become part of, certainly it's part of this broader upsurge in interest in unions and in labor struggles over the last maybe a year. But again, I'll go back to what I said earlier, which is I think there's actually been a lot of unsustainable working conditions, not just in academia, not just for adjuncts, not just, for the people who are striking on the UC campuses today, but, eventually the rubber has to meet the road. And then it turns out, oh, whoops. Well, it turns out, better to, it's better for organizations in the long run to do things that are ultimately sustainable, right? Each UC campus has a long range development plan where they're looking 20 years ahead into the future. But, you got to think about it. If you can't retain and recruit the kind of workers and talent that you need to make your organization thrive, it doesn't matter if you have a 30-year plan.
And the issue of the UAW has been declining as far as auto workers. There are a lot of non-union plants in the South. There are more GM cars made in China than in the United States. You're in a union which has a long history, and it was actually in the 30s and 40s very militant. It organized the auto companies when they didn't want to be organized. The UAW, how do you look at the UAW and being in the UAW, and what has the UAW done to support your struggle and get it out to other auto workers around the country?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I'll be honest, I'm still learning the history of the union and the different levers of power and organization within it. But I will say this, being represented and embedded in a union that has that deep history of organizing, of bringing people together, both within sectors and across sectors, it has made, I think, the strike and the pre-strike process a lot more expeditious. We were able to authorize the strike vote back in October, and then quickly, authorize and begin organizing for the actual strike less than a month later. That is thanks to people within the UAW who do have that experience. And having people with that experience, I think, has made the process more seamless, more expeditious. And I think it's going to end up being a long-term benefit, having that experience behind the movement.
And certainly, too, the UAW has been able to support the bargaining teams who are conducting the bargaining. It's academic workers, it's graduate students, it's postdocs who are actually in the bargaining room with the university's Office of the President's labor lawyers.
And the issue of bargaining, whether or not that should be open to the rank and file, you have this new technology, Zoom, we're on it right now, where people can be participating all over the world, not just in the United States. How do you see bargaining? You think there should be open bargaining or secret bargaining, or how can the members be involved in what is going on with the bargaining of the university?
That's a fantastic question. The bargaining has been open for the most part. Right now, some of it's happening in person, and that's closed to my understanding. But I've been able to catch many bargaining sessions. It started off just out of curiosity, even before I started as a graduate student here over the summer. But it's been actually, sometimes the actual mechanisms of bargaining are a little tedious, but on the whole, it's a beautiful process to be able to see that, like, this is what we are coming together to try and carve out, in terms of our rights and what will happen, over the next 4 years in the UC system. Frankly, I think it's been great to see the open, having the bargain be as open as practically possible.
And Tate?
Yeah, I echo everything Evan said 100%. I will say this, I fall into the cynical camp when it comes to views on closed bargaining sessions. Look, sometimes, they are closed by virtue of logistics. You can't cram, thousands of people into one room. I understand that. But I look at it this way. The tighter the doors are closed, the easier it is to cut under the table deals, between management and union members. And that's not to speak ill of anyone at the bargaining table. But as a general principle, transparency keeps the process open, keeps it participatory, keeps it for everyone to see on both sides. And I think that's something we should continue to be fighting for.
And this is an unfair labor practice strike. It's not an actual strike on the contract. It's an unfair labor practice strike. It's been issued as an indefinite strike. When do you go back, and is that going to be decided by the rank and file?
I believe it is going to be decided by the rank and file. The unfair bargaining practice of the union has been filing complaints. Broadly speaking, the university has not taken the union as seriously as the union wants it to be taken, rightly so, from the union's point of view. So until things are resolved, the strike's going to continue. So
you're prepared to stay out?
Yeah. It's unfortunate that the effects are for people who are teaching assistants the effects are felt by undergraduates, but our collective power and withholding our labor collectively is really the only lever we have at this point.
Tate, you have any thoughts on that?
I'll say this. I think UC's strategy has pivoted from their 2-year-old children, throwing a temper tantrum to we're going to starve them out. They're aware of the numbers. They know that they have their endowment fund that they can draw from and dip into, and they're assuming that they know that they pay us scraps and that we will have scraps to live off of throughout this strike. What they are underestimating, again, circling back to remember what I said about the cross sector and the cross community support. That's bringing in not just food donations, but hardship funds, hardship donations that I think are going to not only be beneficial in the short term, but is going to sustain the strike, again, as long as it needs to in the long term.
And there are education workers throughout California who are concerned about their conditions. In fact, their unions, City College in San Francisco is without a contract. The Oakland Education Association, they're without a contract. The San Francisco Unified School District, a lot of these education unions themselves are under attack. Their privatization, their charters in education. It seems like there's a general assault on public education. What do you think about the idea of unifying all education workers in California.
I think that'd be a beautiful thing.
100%.
Well, I think you have an opportunity to do that. Your power and strength of this strike has shown that collective action on a statewide level of UC workers can have a very powerful effect.
No,
so
totally.
How can people support you? What can people do to support your struggle?
There's several things, but one of the first things that comes to mind is talk to their politicians, call the governor, talk to their representatives in the state assembly and the legislature, and let them know that, this is this strike in a way is about what kind of, as you were saying earlier, like what kind of society we want to have and what we value. And do we value people doing really well in school and pursuing their curiosity? Because if we do, currently, it's in a sense, people are effectively punished for, from a financial point of view, from doing well in these systems that we've set up.
And while folks are on the phone making calls, they can also phone UC President Drake and the Regents office directly. They could end the strike tomorrow by promising us a fair contract. And after they get off the phone, they can go ahead and donate to the UAW strike fund. That'll keep us working. That'll keep us on the picket line. That'll sustain us through this movement.
And Drake, how much did you say he makes again?
Oh, his salary is just north of $890,000 a year.
I think he makes more than the president of the United States.
Yeah, almost double, in fact. Yeah.
And also, you're spread out throughout California on the different campuses. Are you urging people to join the picket line, to support you on the picket line, to come out and join you?
Yes. Yeah. Anyone who would like to join, anyone who sees this again as a system that needs to be rectified, who believe that academic workers deserve dignified working conditions and a living wage to sustain themselves on, is absolutely welcome on the picket line.
Okay, well, I want to thank you again for joining us on WorkWeek. We've been talking with Evan Wartel. He's a UC Davis graduate student in psychology, and Tate LeBlanc. He's a PhD student in developmental psychology at UC Riverside, and they've been talking about their struggle for strike that they've been on, and the struggle of all UC workers and the future of not just public education, but the future of our society. So thanks for joining us on WorkWeek.
Thanks for having us, Steve. Appreciate it.
Great. Good. Well, that was good. That went well. So we'll edit that. I'll get that out. And I talked to Peter about the possibility of a kind of a united labor campaign to get unions organized, rallies of all the different unions together. Because if we can get all these different unions together collectively, that will strengthen this fight. The other thing is, Newsom and the Democrats are in charge, and the unions have been supporting them.
Right.
And they're actually on the Board of Regents, the Lieutenant Governor and Newsom. So, I mean, we can really say, look, you need to represent the strikers, the workers on these campuses. 100%. I think that would be important. And I don't think any of the unions have really said, where are the Democrats? They're running the university and they appoint the regents.
Right.
The other thing is, I mean, the amount of money that is going to lawyers to fight the union, millions of dollars. They have union busting law firms that they hire, and they tie up the unions, with these lawyers. And I think that has to be a political issue in California. Why, instead of spending the money on the students, on the workers, they're spending it on lawyers.
Between the law firms, the PR misinformation campaigns, they could have paid our contract 3 times over already. Absolutely.
Exactly. I mean, that's they want the power over you, and they're going to use those resources to fight just demands of the workers. I think that's what's going on. But I think for the people of California, that has to be a political issue. Why? Who's running the university? And why are they violating labor law? Why are they providing starvation wages for the workers? I mean, it's really crazy in California.
In a way, too, I think another similar issue that needs to be highlighted is like, who are the regents exactly? They get mentioned in the paper, the Board of Regents did this, delivered a budget report here or there. But, if you look at who they are, there's a number of appointments that were for political reasons, right? There's too few scientists, in my opinion, who are actually having an advisory role in the effective, the equivalent of the board of directors for the entire UC system. Too few educators.
Well, that's one of actually, I was on strike in 1968 at San Francisco State. And it was the longest student strike in the history of the country, like 6 months. But that's one of the things we did. At that time, I was active in SDS, but we put out who are the regents, who are the money, who are the people who really run the university.
Yeah.
And what we found is that the regents were basically profiteering off of the college, as they are at UC. It's a business operation, and basically they're not interested in public education. They're interested in how much money they can make. And it's amazing in California how much money goes to development, construction projects. You know, I mean, they built stadium at UC Berkeley, and when they're cutting other programs, and the money, the funding of UC, where is the money going? Who decides where it goes? And it's certainly not, the students and the workers have very little to do about that, actually. So that's an issue. I don't know if there's an education committee in the UAW campuses, but I mean, having education for the education of the people of California. And there have been previous struggles in California for elected Board of Regents, so that the people of California elect their regents instead of them being appointed. Now they're just political appointees who are multi-millionaires and business people for the most part. I think there's one, I think there may be one union person on the Board of Regents, but the Board of Regents doesn't include working people.
Except for the student representative.
Which I think is a figurehead. Right.
It's a learning opportunity for the people of California. What is a university all about and what it should be? We have, as far as Labor Fest, Gray Brecken is a geographer at UC, has been, and he and others have been long struggling against the university, corporatization of the university. So that's an important issue to get to the people of California, because I mean, it's really for the people of California, the university, but it's acting against the interests of the people of California, I think.
Right. One of the interesting things, I think, is that, from a budgetary perspective, the University of California is actually a set of medical systems with a research wing attached that gets state funding. And given that that's the reality of where the revenue is coming from, having the University Office of the President organized in a way that counteracts that natural set of incentives, I think would be a intelligent thing to do. And I don't know that that's exactly the case.
Yeah, that's an issue. I mean, who controls where the investment is, and the budget of the university. And as you were saying earlier, I mean, they have massive endowment, and it's certainly not going for what it should go for. It's going for investments. In fact, I remember a board meeting I attended. Richard Blum was talking about patents. They wanted to partnership with use the research for patents to make money. And it's just it was like bizarre, just I
don't know. I feel like there's a certain given that there is variable amount of state support for higher education, if they can make money off of patent, and that goes to furthering the research activities and going for better equipment or a better lab or more people or higher wages, I don't necessarily see that as a problem. Certainly, like thinking of the UC system as like it's just like a company, but it's actually not for profit. I think that's where things start to get really philosophically and morally murky. Well,
if the regents are appointed because they're business people, because they contribute to politicians, that's the focus of the university. In other words, they're business people. They want to make money, and some of them have personally benefited from investments or taking money from pension funds or that kind of thing. I mean, the priority is not, I think, public interest, but private interest. And that's really one of the reasons that you have starvation wages. I mean, in California, there was one of the things is that education should be free in California. There used to be something called the master plan. I don't know if you're familiar, California master plan.
I'm not.
Well, that was in the 60s, was set up to make, and I like $72 a semester when I was going to school. but it used to be free, and that's changed now. It's and people are spending a fortune to go to college, and you, at the same time, you have massive wealth. They don't want to go after the billionaires in California. In fact, I was involved in a campaign for a depletion oil tax. You know, Texas and Alaska have a depletion oil tax to fund the state. We tried to get an initiative on the ballot for a depletion oil tax, and the Democrats, Phil Ting, who's head of in San Francisco, he's head of the Finance Committee, the California Assembly. He said, I said, why don't you introduce a depletion oil tax? So he told me, well, why don't you get the petitions? You should do it. You know, you should do it. You know, I mean, this is the guy, you know, but they don't want to tax oil. Right. I mean, the oil companies. I mean, if California and Texas have a depletion oil, they could raise billions, and they could make that for education, to get rid of tuition. I mean, I think those are demands that we really need to have. Public education should be free for people in California, people in this country, you know, really, with the wealth in this country. And that's another issue. Why do you have to go into debt to go to college?
Right. That's absurd.
You know, another thing that could be done at the federal level is restricting the overhead that can be taken out of research grants. So a lot, I don't know about how it is over in Evan's department, but here in our site department, a lot of National Science Foundation grants, a lot of National Institute of Health grants. But what the university has done is, you know, you can apply to as many grants as you want, but they'll take 55% of it off the top. And it's not really clear where that 55% goes. I can imagine the chancellor's mansion and the president's mansion. But even at the federal level, Congress, if they could outlaw or restrict, again, talking about aligning incentives, the amount of overhead that can be taken out of federal dollars, you know, federally funded research grants, I think that would also help, you know, with the alignment of incentives and, you know, restrict the greed that we see proliferating at UC.
Absolutely. Siphoning off the money that they're getting to other things is been done a long time. I think, you know, the union, the labor movement needs to educate itself and educate the public about, you know, making the institution an institution that serves the needs of the people. That's really what we're talking about. I mean, that's what University of California should be doing. That's what it was formed to do, but something else is going on.